show of hands, how many of you have heard of this little technology called AI? Okay, so a couple of you. It's making its way. How quaint. Perfect. So I would love to have our panelists join me on stage, please. They're just like waiting in the wings, like Rocky. Come up on stage. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and kick off. Sound good? Yeah. Perfect. Yay! You can clap. Clapping's great. So we have rehearsed this, and they are going to introduce themselves with a little bit of choreography, song, and dance. Yes, kick it off, SK.
Hi, good evening, everyone. SK Sharma. I'm the Chief Analytics and AI Officer of Universal Music Group, based here in San Diego. I'll keep it simple for now.
Hi, everybody. Ramsey Fryer. I'm head of sales and go-to-market for a company called Rümi.ai, San Diego-based startup. Nice to meet everybody.
Hi, my name is Lena. I'm the Chief Technical Officer and co-founder in the Good Face Projects, a company based of San Diego. We're specialized in chemistry AI.
Hello, everyone. My name is Badri Raghavan. I'm the Vice President for AI at ResMed. For those who haven't, thank you for the shout out there. We're one of those S&P 500 companies you never heard of, but we're right here, and we're in 140 countries. So we'll talk more about it if you can.
Perfect. So now that we know that most of you have heard of AI, which is great, otherwise this panel will be very, very awkward, we want to talk more about AI across all the different sectors, how we use it, what it can be used for, some of the dangers of it. But one of the first questions that I want to start us off with is making sure that we are all on the same page and aligned with what we mean when we say AI. Because a lot of times people are like, I use AI, and it's really just a chat bot. So what I would love is for, if you panelists, I'm going to ask each of you just to give one or two sentences on how would you define AI?
Sure, absolutely, Misty. I think you make a really good point. There's a lot of conflation. So the way we think, and we're a $53 billion company, so we have enterprise use cases. So my definition is going to be a little bit more aligned there. But we think about replicating parts of human cognition, and that's a really good broad perspective. But specifically, the enterprise use cases are where we can use it to create value. So top line growth, operational efficiencies, and things like that. So there's this whole other conversation about what people think AI is. That's what I'll stay away from today. So.
Awesome.
And I'm not an engineer. I think I might be the only panelist who is not an engineer, so I'm not going to get into the specifics. But the one thing I would just say is in these types of discussions, I think in addition to seeing the breadth that we have in terms of industry, there's also, and a lot of terms underneath AI, whether you really mean a large language model, a neural network, machine learning, like I think being more specific when we talk about what AI is will be helpful. The thing I would just mention is there's also many slices to this cake. And there's tons of innovation going on at the hardware level, at the base model layers that many of us are built on top of. And my business is an application sitting on top of all of this. So it's a very choppy part of the wave to be on for the application layer. So my perspective, I guess, comes from the application layer of the stack.
From my perspective, well, of course, it's like it's definitely not a single modal system. It's a system that uses multiple modals and not just like neural networks, but many more that is capable of self-enhancing, self-education, and it successfully replicates actions of human or imitates them, or at some point, hopefully not so soon, it will very consciously replicate us.
Badri, how about you?
Yeah, I think my fellow panelists covered really most of it. I look at it as essentially saying, if you're interacting with a machine and it seems human to you, it's probably AI. Good enough definition, working definition, I would say.
I love that. It also sounds like some of the customer service reps that I've dealt with. So this question is for Badri and Lena. What are some recent developments in AI that have caught your attention?
Okay, shall I go first? Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to give you a really surprising list, but to me, the top of the list was the emergence of these multimodal AI models. So specifically, if you're thinking about GPT-4o Omni. So the way the models is now reacting in real time to audio, to video, text. So, truly multimodal, truly instantaneous. If you haven't seen the demo from OpenAI, please go watch it. It's guaranteed to blow your mind. So things of that, they're not the only company. Google's also released that. I think that is a true new game changer. Sort of the second one that's caught my eye is on the opposite end of the spectrum, these so-called small language models. So if you think of, they're like 5.3, there's any number of them. So these small models are so cheap and efficient, you can run them on the cheapest hardware you can think of. Your Arduino chips, literally pennies on the dollar, you can run these things. So I'm really excited to see what can be developed based on these language models. And they're pretty effective for their specific purposes, right? And the third thing I think that sort of caught my eye is, again, nothing surprising, but I'd say how close the open source models are to the proprietary models. So if you look at Llama 3, you look at Mixtral, to me that is astonishing how much the open source is caught up to the proprietary models.
Well, from my perspective, there are also several things that were catching my mind. It's, yes, smaller models, I agree, they're very effective. Surprisingly, they give sometimes even better results than large models. AlphaFold was a very interesting late release that will definitely enhance many medical companies, and it will enable them to develop more and more protein-based treatments. But in general, I think it's not some specific model. It's the speed of change and the willingness of companies to release more and more at a pace that's almost incredible. Literally each week our company is trying out something new. It's every week we try, we implement, we compare. So the speed is probably the most breathtaking factor in the evolution of models. And I really hope that it goes hand in hand with safety, because I'm not sure if that is actually catching up.
Wonderful. I like to every once in a while just watch Friends from start to end. I don't know if you guys feel that same way, but I find it very interesting. And they would have this computer, they're like, it does 215 megabytes, it's so fast. And I'm like, oh, wow, we've come a long way since then. And that was just 20 years ago. And now I remember oh, I used to Google search, and now Google search is so passé. So I think speed is definitely something that's really interesting. This next question is for Ramsey, you and SK. How do you think you can prevent, especially remind us of the markets and sectors you're in, but how can you prevent AI from just being a derivative tech add-on in your industry? Just something that you say, oh, we use AI, but it's not really meaningful or valuable.
Yeah, well, so to remind everybody, so Rümi is an online meeting platform. So that's something that's existed for a long time. I think the way that you have to avoid a couple of things. To avoid becoming obsolete, you have to really know what's changing underneath you that may eclipse what you're doing. So there's boundaries between where the language models leave off and the last mile that we are building on top of to actually serve a purpose. And we need to know where that is today and really think about where that's going to be tomorrow with the next release.
Can you give an example of what something like that might look like?
Well, just what Badri mentioned in terms of the 4 Omni, suddenly being able to interpret video, voices, everything else, which, by the way, was enabled in a chip improvement, right? This whole stack bubbles up. So anyone who's in the business of interpreting video images might be out of business because maybe the language model can do that. So in our world, we need to be focused really specifically on who do we serve and be specific. Meetings, everyone uses meetings. Who within meetings do we really want to focus on? What is their problem, what's their job, and how we make them better at their job. That's the last mile that if we focus on, I think we can protect ourselves from those types of disruptions.
Nice. SK?
Yeah, sure. So, again, we work with the world's largest musical artists, Taylor Swift, Drake, The Weeknd. So the reason that's important is because if you consider our position as a media company that has IP assets, the invocation of AI needs to have very clear use cases, right? There's this really sort of fine and admirable line between creative content, the human condition, artistic creativity, and all these things. And then also the possibility, I think as my other panelists have talked about, for technology not just accelerate certain things, but and not fundamentally replace creativity, but provide the opportunity for things like user engagement, actually driving greater fandom, understanding the facets of why people cognitively associate with a particular piece of content, right? Whether many of you are used to this on Netflix or Spotify, that's the business that we're in, right? So I think when I think about the use cases that we have, you can imagine a very straightforward use case like using transfer learning to think about how an emerging artist is actually going to go ahead and deploy content that's perhaps in a different language, right? So you can imagine Portuguese content in Germany. How is that going to perform? Well, you can use these things called embeddings, and you can start to study the evolution of that to get a sense of, aha, okay, this is what my audience opportunity might be, this is what my listener opportunity might be, and that ties back into lifetime value and all these other things. So I guess to answer your question, Misty, for us it's not a bolt-on, it's very much a core part of our DNA and how we do business, alongside our marketing spend and so many other things. So we don't have that problem, but it's definitely important to think about, what the judicious use cases of AI are, so you avoid that problem.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for that. This question is for everyone. What are some valuable outcomes that AI can be used for in each of your industries?
Yeah, so it almost feels like a planted question because I happen to be in healthcare, and I'm telling you, I'm a little bit biased, but I do believe this is where we're going to have the most impact by multiple measures. So in healthcare, I'll talk about sort of 3 steps of it, or 3 areas, right? The first one, diagnostics, right, where AI is coming in. There's so many examples. Let me pick a couple that's already being used here for major impact. So if you look at gastrointestinal surgery, right, this is something routinely anyone over 60 gets done, right? And when you do that, it essentially has a video going through your large intestine, taking hours and hours of video, right? And even the most skilled surgeons miss at least 20%. I don't mean to scare you, older, 60 or older people, but yeah, they miss, over 20% of potential tumors. And now there are AI algorithms that assist in real time as the procedure is going on to stop and identify tumors. So that's one in diagnostics. Closer to my space, which is in the sleep apnea space, difficulty in sleeping and breathing. There are now smart watches out there that detect sleep apnea. For those of you who haven't heard of sleep apnea, it's your involuntary choking at night. Okay, it's an extremely prevalent disease. 1 in 8 people. I was trying to estimate, right, roughly about a crowd of 120 people. There's 15 of you who probably have sleep apnea. Okay, it's crazy prevalent, underdiagnosed. So there's massive opportunities that we are working on using AI to help diagnose. Second part is treatment, therapy, right? So particular algorithms that are used, for example, the most well-known is, diabetes. These continuous glucose monitors, personalized, and dose response to your needs, right? And those are controlled by algorithms. We use that, for example, at ResMed for personalizing how sleep is treated, sleep apnea is treated. A third, sorry, a little bit longer answer, but the third area, which is the most underappreciated in healthcare, is all the glamour goes to, I'm sorry to use this flippancy, but to cancer and heart attacks. These are the most difficult conditions to treat. But the real problem in healthcare is so-called long-term diseases that need to be controlled at home or treated at home, right? I'm now spacing out on the word for this. And there, the dirty secret is about a third of the people who are treated for these long-term conditions, like diabetes, like chronic kidney disease, like sleep apnea, drop off therapy after 1 year. After 2 years, half of the people drop off. And imagine, you had a heart attack, 2 years later, you're no longer taking medications. So the biggest part where AI, for instance, can have a huge impact in patient adherence, which comes down to personalization, making it relevant, specific, understandable to you. So yeah, it's massive in the healthcare space.
Wonderful. I think this is the first time I've ever heard someone call cancer and heart attacks sexy. So thank you so much for that.
This is a techie speaking.
Nice.
So from the point of view of the industry that we are working at, which is chemistry, the application of AI is very broad. So first of all, what probably comes to your minds is medications and typical research, and from the initial research to the markets for a medication is around 14 years. So that can be reduced by 30 to 50% with the use of AI, and this of course means more better medications and better treatments for us in future, which is of course great. But there are way more applications for discovery of new materials, for reducing some tedious repeated work in regulatory, which for example we do, for creating new formulas and very quickly verifying how they will be used by consumer, will be consumer happy or anything, so predictive modeling. So it is a very broad range, from inventing new medications, materials, to taking things to market and seeing how people will be using them. And I think it really, really depends on the product. So one important thing is, like, AI is not a product, right? And when everyone is very afraid of AI, I would say, like, you shouldn't be afraid of AI. You should be afraid of the product that's built on the top of AI. So from that perspective, so many products can be built on top of chemistry that it's opening a huge field for inventing pretty much anything that surrounds us, because everything is made of chemical ingredients.
Nice. So we have reducing human error, we have increasing the speed to which we can find solutions and then deliver those solutions. What are some other positive outcomes for AI?
So in our industry, we're focused on meetings, and if you think about where institutional knowledge really lives, so much of it lives inside of discussions that happen in meetings. And it actually blows our mind now to think of the years and years of meetings that happened where, you know, a few meeting notes went out afterward, and that's kind of all that was left, right? So what we now have the ability to do, which is incredible, is you can go back and search years and years of meeting history and ask a simple question like, you know, how many customers do I have in Germany right now? Get an answer that fast. Or anything, like if you know, we think about who are the biggest consumers of meetings in a typical industry or a business. Sales team's number one. So, you know, how can perfect memory help a sales team? In so many ways. You know, in the last 2 months, which competitors are people mentioning the most? For hiring teams, you know, here are our 5 superstars. What did they all say during their interview that would help us predict how to hire better in the future? So there's just so many ways. And we were actually playing with this the other day because we have many years of history internally. And we were asking it questions and almost shuddering at the answers. We're like, so who's sick the most? And you get an answer, and it's accurate. And who's the most productive? And you're gonna get an answer. It's really transformative. So really the question now is, what do you do with that?
I love that. So you can, so good. AI can tattletale. That's great. That's a very great outcome. What about you, SK?
Sure, yeah. So this is always an interesting question for me to answer because I'm actually a biomedical scientist. I'm a drug designer, so I'm on that side of the fence where I want to talk a lot about algorithms and the uses of LLMs in de novo materials design, and I can do that forever, but I'll try to keep it specific to the industry that I'm in today. So we have a lot of practical use cases. You can imagine hero image scoring, for instance. That is for album art, right? So to try to understand what specific types of images are much more likely to affinitize with a subset of users or listeners. You can think about use cases where you have highly engaged predictions, if you will, for users that are really, really good and engaged with a certain subset of content, but perhaps they want to be able to understand how that would map over to different sets of listeners and different types of content. And so this all sort of sounds like something that is easy for people, but it's actually quite challenging when you consider, you know, the billions of people in the world and infrastructure coming online. So a lot of what we do in terms of our judicious invocation of AI is, again, keep in mind that human creativity is exactly that. It's human creativity. We are not in favor of violating intellectual property. We are not in favor of violating copyright. I think, there needs to be, I think, as was said earlier, an eye towards, ethical treatment and fairness in training and also inference. So we do all of that on a very foundational level. But for us, it's less about kind of, finding out which employees are sick in a queryable fashion. It's really more about thinking, how do we get people to engage with music and video in a manner that is true and consistent? And most recently, that's been in the therapeutic space. So people recovering from TBI, for instance, right? In terms of modality, they have a slightly different approach to how you measure engagement. So for someone with TBI, you have to think about this from a neuronal perspective. And so that's where AI, long-scale algorithms, long-scale temporal data really allows us to understand if the methods that we have in music are effective or not. So those are some practical examples of what we do.
Wonderful. We have now entered the come at me, bro section of the panel. There's a lot of talk around the threat and potential negative cases of AI, because let's be honest, people like to people. So how can we govern the use of AI while still allowing for continued innovative growth? And I'd like to pose this question to Lena and SK.
If we ever try to regulate AI from the side of government, I don't think it will work because it will literally be regulated only in the country that accepted that law, right? So pretty much whoever does this loses, and the race will just continue in the whole other world, and that country will be left abroad. So it's like a lose-lose combination. The safety of AI should be coming from each and every company. Like I said, AI is not a threat, the product is a threat, right? There is no threat in image recognition or face recognition until you attach it to a drone that can shoot, and then you can target on a specific person. Well, that's an issue, that is a product, and that's something that should be, of course, regulated. But at the very end, the ethics of AI and what we are building and how we're using should be coming from the inside of the company. So each company should consider very carefully how they're productizing, what they're allowing their users to do, what if it's a generative AI, what are the limits of generative AI, where it should stop, and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
And do you think, even if you're doing this internally inside of your company, do you think there should be a larger oversight for all the companies in the world?
Absolutely, but it should be not coming from the government. It should be coming from the industry itself. And from, when you drive sometimes into a neighborhood, you will see a sign, drive like your kids live here. So all of us should be driving like our kids are going to live with it. And, if we don't do this, our kids will have to clean up after us. And I think they already have a lot of things to clean up, so.
Just take one more thing off their plate. SK, what do you think?
Sure, yeah. So I think Lena has summarized it exceptionally well, right? I think if you think about regulation, certainly government has a role in regulation. We all benefit from some core regulations. But I started my career as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, right? We had very clear, specific rules about what we could and couldn't do, not just around data, but with capital, there's risk, there's insurance. So all of that is a very helpful framework. But I think to Lena's point, if we think about productization and how we think about this in our industry, right, a lot of this really sort of comes down to what are the practical use cases? We've got GDPR in the European Union, but of course, if you're not in the European Union, you're not necessarily bound, right? You're not necessarily bound to the penalties contained therein. California's got the CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act, but again, that doesn't apply to every single state. So I think to Lena's point, it can be a bit restrictive and frankly, at times, perhaps even retard innovation to say this is exactly how we're going to do things. And just, I was at UBS and I lived in Zurich for a couple of years and I love Zurich extraordinarily, but we had to spend 10 to 15 hours a week just keeping up with regulations coming down from the EU, right? And so The
What if
EU
there was an AI solution for that?
We do this for chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, chemistry is interesting, right? I mean, when you can teach rules, right, in physics and chemistry, the potential for hallucinations are much lower, right, which is actually quite nice. But yeah, there are solutions, but I guess my point is that it really comes back to a coalition, a co-op, if you will, right? And going, these are the types of things that we want to protect, and these are the types of things that, like, we're just going to draw a line in the sand. In our case, it's we are not going to steal creators' music, their lyrics. We're not going to illegally train, right? And we go out and we defend that, litigiously if we have to. So.
Awesome. Okay, so this is one of our last questions. I want you all to imagine just for a moment that it is the year of our AI overlord 2026. Kidding, too far. But AI has reached like peak hype. What's next? Like what happens after that? So I'll let Badri and Ramsey go first, and then Lena and SK if you have anything to add on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think I'm going to share similar views with the panelists here, maybe most of the audience, which is, everyone recognizes when something is frothy and hypey, and yes, we recognize where things are. Typically, I mean, in my view, I think the frothiness is in things like valuations, where, because the value generation from these AI companies doesn't match the investment dollars that are flowing into some of these companies. So if you see what I'm saying? So 2026, ultimately, I think what survives and what, stays are applications that ultimately show bottom line value, right? So when you focus on your customers' problems, so in our case, it's the patient. When you're completely focused on what benefits your customer, in our case, a patient, and stay with an ethical framework like SK is talking, Lena also mentioned that, and develop these applications, it's my strong belief that that will transcend the hype and will survive. So that's my hope for 2026. Talk to me in 2 years, yeah.
I think similarly, my hope is just that we stop always saying AI and has this. That's just going to be the norm, just like internet or everything in the early days of internet. It'll just be the expectation that it is part of everything. And I think just like the last era, there'll be the traditional businesses that get it and survive, and the ones that don't and get eaten alive by someone newer and smarter and faster. But I think that's where the real value starts taking off. I think right now there's a lot of demoware, there's a lot of possibility. And my hope is that in 2 years we're going to actually just see how much better things really are across the board.
Awesome. You guys have a very optimistic future. I love that. Lena, SK, anything to add?
I will fix the future.
Everyone, Lena's going to fix the future. Nice. Yeah, there we go.
All right, so I think the speed of the rise and fall of companies will be incredible, because what yesterday was a company, tomorrow will be useless. And the number of startups that are coming and leaving will be like insane. The race of models will continue for sure. It's like bigger, better, more data, like more capabilities. For sure, we will also benefit from that, but it's going to be very interesting. It's like riding a wave. It's like we're at the point of a revolution, and it's like the time when that's exactly like today it is happening. Very exciting, but frankly, I also hope that the hype will lower a little bit, because my background is AI and data science. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I'm just like, I don't know how about you, but I'm so annoyed how many times everybody says AI, so like, that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here has covered it extraordinarily well, right? I think, one, I'm tired of the hype myself. I have a bunch of AI patents, right? But like, to everyone else's point, like many of us have been doing this work for a long time. I joke somewhere that we've been working in this area long before McKinsey convinced you this was cool, right? And I think that's a big part of it. When you think about hype, I think to the point Badri made about valuation, that's essential. We're sort of, taking NVIDIA out of the equation and a couple other things associated with NVIDIA, but in the public markets, right, there's sort of this epic repricing that's going on. And I think that's just gonna take some time to filter through. I think listening to the voice of the customer is absolutely essential. It's very easy to say, we're blockchain, AI, data, whatever you want to call it, right? But ultimately, when you reprice and you think about the new macroeconomic environment that we're in now, you better be building enterprise value. If you're not building enterprise value and you're not actually growing a business where you can demonstrate ROI and LTV and all these types of things, good luck to you. And I think that kind of opens the door for the comment Lena made around sort of the rise and fall, if you will, right? And I think, as Ramsey said, there's been temptation. That's like telling everyone I brush my teeth with Colgate, toothpaste in the morning, right? Like, as long as you brush your teeth, I'm happy, right? So I think that acknowledging that there are aspects of AI that are core part of, fundamental workflows every day, let's just move past that, right? And focus on the value for society and humankind.
Awesome. Also, 9 out of 10 dentists would disagree with you. That's always a stat, 9 out of 10 dentists. So we have 1 minute left. So last 15-second hot take, one actionable takeaway for this audience on AI. I'm sorry, we're not supposed to say that anymore. On blank across the sectors, 15 seconds each, go.
Follow the math, physics, and science. Ignore the bullshit.
Focus on the very last mile if you're an application.
Focus on very, very patented, exclusive researches and workflow systems.
Focus on your customer. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to my amazing panelists.